So you're telling me that Mike Brown wasn't the reason that the Sacramento Kings can't shoot or defend the three? You're telling me that firing Mike Brown didn't magically make these lulls defensively and offensively that the Sacramento Kings have almost every single game just poof, go away? Huh. Well, hell, now who do we blame?
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it is not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And full disclaimer, obviously that introduction was sarcastic. Full disclaimer, I do not take any pleasure whatsoever in the Sacramento Kings losing to the Los Angeles Lakers tonight. I do not take any pleasure in it at all. I would have much rather have seen the Sacramento Kings beat the Lakers, of course, and Doug Christie get his first win in his first game as the interim head coach of the Sacramento Kings. I would have far preferred that. And nothing that I'm about to say has any sort of negative reflection on Doug Christie whatsoever, because it damn sure isn't his fault either. But it turns out that firing Mike Brown didn't just make all these Kings issues magically disappear. With Mike Brown this season, the Kings couldn't make or defend the three. The Kings struggled to put together a full game effort. The Kings had back-breaking lapses during games. The Kings dealt with Keegan Murray struggling, especially shooting from the perimeter. The Kings barely played Keon Ellis. Kings starters played heavy minutes. And finally, the Kings made big comebacks, often only to ultimately lose games. That was with Mike Brown all season long. So the Kings blamed him for it, fired him for it. And tonight, in their first game without Mike Brown, the Kings couldn't make or defend the three. The Kings shot 27% from beyond the arc, 11 of 40. The Lakers shot 53%, 14 of 26. The Kings struggled to put together a full game effort. The Kings had back-breaking lapses during this game. They gave up a 40-point first quarter and a 42-point third quarter. The Kings dealt with more of Keegan Murray struggling. 5 points, 1 of 6 from three-point range. The Kings tonight barely played Keon Ellis. Oh, I thought that was Mike Brown's fault. Mike Brown didn't like Keon Ellis. Mike Brown was choosing not to play Keon Ellis. The Kings only played Keon 13 minutes and 24 seconds in this game. And he was really good during that time. 11 points, 4-4 from the field, 3 of 3 from three-point range. Had a rebound, an assist, and a steal, and a block. The Kings starters played heavy minutes. DeMar DeRozan, 41. De'Aaron Fox, 39. Domantas Sabonis would have played heavier minutes had he not gotten into foul trouble. He looked awful today, by the way, mainly because I still think he's battling with that illness that had him out last game for the Sacramento Kings. He flew into LA and joined the team this morning. And finally, the Kings made a big comeback only to lose. They were down by 20 points in the fourth quarter. They got it all the way down to 6. Lakers were able to close it out. So the takeaway from that whole exercise is what we already knew. The Kings roster is flawed. They should not be this bad. That might be true. They should not be this bad now on a 6-game losing streak. But there are clear issues with this roster. Issues that we have known existed for at least a year, probably longer. Issues that the front office has failed to address. Mike Brown took the fall for the players and the coaches. And believe it or not, the problems didn't all just go away. And somehow, the Kings actually managed just to make it worse. Because by firing Mike Brown, the only successful head coach that the Kings have had in nearly 2 decades, they've thrown all of this onto the lap of Doug Christie. James Ham from ESPN 1320, I thought, put it brilliantly. The Kings right now are a runaway freight train, and Doug Christie has been thrown in front of it to try and slow it down or stop it, and it could end up running over DC in the process. Make no mistake about it. I don't blame Doug for a single bit of this. And I'm actually going to kind of argue against myself for a second, because I do believe in some aspects things will get better. And maybe that's the wrong thing to say. I do believe things will start to gradually change. Whether it's for the better or not, I guess we will see. But look, DC inherited this nightmare just over 24 hours ago. So in 24 hours, in one shoot around at USC this morning, how much was Doug Christie really going to be able to change? How much was he really going to be able to adjust? One of the things that we knew they were focusing on was simplifying the offense. Well, to some extent, that seemed to work. Because I did feel like the Kings were moving the ball. The ball was zipping around, moving around better a lot tonight. And the Kings had 38 assists in this game. They assisted on 38 of their 50 made baskets. So that's a good thing. I do think simplifying the offense to some extent is a good thing for this team. But my point is, Doug Christie can only work on and adjust so much in such a short period of time. So naturally, a lot of things are going to look the same. He did make some minor lineup tweaks, some minor lineup adjustments. I expect those tweaks and adjustments to continue, or maybe get a little more extreme or more severe as time goes on. Like I just laid out in that whole exercise, the Sacramento Kings of the last 5 games with Mike Brown at the helm look the exact same as the Sacramento Kings tonight without Mike Brown. Or at least very, 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 very similar. I was not expecting it to look that different. One, because, like I just said, Doug Christie and the Kings didn't exactly have a lot of time to change a bunch of things, and we're never going to try to implement and change a bunch of things at risk of completely overwhelming the Kings altogether. And 2, because as I've made it abundantly clear over the last 48 hours, Mike Brown was not the problem. Mike Brown was not at fault. I don't know how much more Doug Christie can tell this team, or what more he can really do or tweak with this team to get them to stop making the obvious, blatant, fundamental mistakes that they're making, or be able to have them play any better in the areas where there clearly is a deficiency on this roster, which only the front office can fix. But here we are. Doug is not to be held responsible at all for the growing pains for him implementing himself into this new role and trying to make some adjustments, and how this season, which I think will be a train wreck from here on out, how this season will proceed. Doug is not to be blamed for it. I'm rooting for Doug. I wish him the absolute best. Again, I would rather, even if I am clearly disgusted with the firing of Mike Brown, I think it was an absolute disaster of a decision by the Sacramento Kings. I would rather the Kings miraculously turn this season around and Doug Christie look like the greatest interim head coach since Ty Lue, and everything start to work out and be sunshine and rainbows, so I can take this podcast and I can go on social media in front of everybody and say, I was dead wrong, or I made a mountain out of a molehill, or whatever. I would rather look like an idiot at any point than have the Sacramento Kings be as bad as I think they're going to be because of the mistakes of the front office and ownership again. But I don't think that's going to be the case. This isn't about me. This isn't about Doug. And it never should have been about Mike. It's about the flawed roster and the front office that built it and has not fixed it. They're still on the clock. And now they've lost their scapegoat. Now they got no shadow to hide behind. They're in the spotlight. And you best believe we're going to shine it bright here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Robinhood and Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for just $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. So if you thought I got all the Mike Brown talk out of my system on yesterday's Locked On Kings podcast, I hate to break it to you, you're mistaken, because more information has come out, more information worth talking about. I've seen and we've discussed this and glossed over this a little bit over the course of the last really week, even before Mike Brown was fired. But I want to address this again and go into a little more detail about it. This concept or idea that Mike Brown lost the locker room. He very well may have. And typically, in sports, as a coach, you lose your locker room, you're done. You're done. And that very well may have happened here in Sacramento. But here's the point I want to make. Reportedly, Mike Brown actually had issues with some, I don't know how many, it sounded like multiple players on the Kings roster. From what I understand, to be perfectly clear, from what I understand, De'Aaron Fox was not one of them. In fact, everything that I've seen, every conversation that I've had points to De'Aaron Fox actually being a supporter of Mike Brown. I don't know that for certain. I have not been told directly by any straight up party that Fox liked or disliked Mike Brown. But from the conversations that I've had, putting two and two together, and the understanding of their relationship up until this point, it is my understanding that if there were issues with Mike Brown amongst players in that locker room, De'Aaron Fox was not one of them, or De'Aaron Fox was not one of the players that had problems with Mike and how he coached. Specifically, the accountability, the calling players out in practice or calling players out to the media at the podium after games. Here's what I'll say. Of course, I'm not naive to this. I'm not dumb. I know it is tremendously easier and more practical to get rid of a coach than it is to get rid of one, two, however many disgruntled players because of that coach. It's not unheard of to choose the coach over those players, but more often than not, it's a hell of a lot easier to get rid of the coach, especially in the NBA. This is a players' league. It's just the way it is. But my question is this. If you're getting rid of the coach because the players in question don't like the coach, because the coach is trying to hold them accountable for fundamental reasons, fundamental mental mistakes, a basic standard, not of Mike Brown, not to this incredibly high Mike Brown standard that nobody could possibly reach unless you're a superstar, not that, but to the basic NBA standards for a winning basketball team and being a winning player. If the players were not able to make that standard, even if Mike Brown was fired because of it, it does not excuse them for not reaching that standard. You know, it's funny. The New York Knicks defeated the Washington Wizards in overtime today. It's a nail biter, probably a lot closer than the New York Knicks wanted it to be. In this game, the Knicks were up by 3 with seconds remaining. Same exact scenario to what the Sacramento Kings had against the Detroit Pistons a couple of nights ago. What did the New York Knicks do? They fouled the Wizards and sent them to the free throw line so they could not hit a 3. The Knicks did what Mike Brown was telling the Kings to do. Now, if the Kings players refused to do it because they had checked out and they didn't want to listen to Mike Brown anymore, they are actively choosing not to make the right fundamental basketball play in the moment because they don't want to follow their head coach's lead. That is not a poor reflection on Mike Brown. That is a poor reflection on the players. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it sure seems like it. And we saw the Knicks execute exactly what Mike Brown was saying because they understand that moment. Mike Brown understood that moment. We all understood that, hey, the Pistons need 3 points here. The only thing you can't do is give up a 3, or in the case of De'Aaron Fox, foul a 3-point shooter and give them a 4-point play to win the game. And what you're supposed to do is foul them and send them to the free throw line where they can only get 2 points, basic math. And the Kings did not execute that. If they had a problem with Mike Brown pointing that out and calling that out after the game, as he should have, that's on them. That's not on Mike. So my overall point is, if Mike lost the locker room, is that locker room worth having in the first place? Is that locker room worth choosing over Mike, even if Mike is the easiest decision to make? Look, Mike Brown may not have been the right coach for this group. But has this group shown you enough to believe that they deserve to stay and Mike Brown deserved to go? My point, again, to hammer it home and make it perfectly clear. The decision is made. It's done with. I'm still going to have sour grapes about it. I promise you, not every episode of the Locked On Kings podcast for the remainder of the season is going to be a Mike Brown sob story. I promise you, I know at some point, probably now, you're going to want me to move on from it. I recognize that. I'm not going to continue to do this, but it's the day after. These feelings are still fresh. The reality is, the decision's done. The Kings made the decision to move on from Mike Brown. But the players are still here, the players that still failed to execute. And if they chose to not execute simply because they didn't like their coach holding them accountable for not executing, that says a whole lot more about them and is a whole lot worse for them than it is for Mike Brown. Because the Kings organization still has to deal with them and try and find a way to win with them. It's not great. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, including on the Mike Brown thing, I'll make this quick. An excerpt from The Athletic today, an article from Sam Amick and Anthony Slater. I want to read this portion of this article from you, or for you, and respond to it really quick. Team sources insisted that the decision to fire Brown was Monty McNair's. The organization is choosing to back the front office of McNair and Wes Wilcox, who are still considered safe amid the Kings' struggles. The roster depth has eroded the last 2 seasons, forcing Brown to search a rotation that hasn't always had answers. It's a weakness the front office acknowledges and is still attempting to remedy by the February 6th trade deadline. So, a couple things to pull away from this. Number one, I think it is fair to have skepticism about, was this truly Monty McNair's decision, or did this decision come from ownership? Did this decision come from higher up? It's totally fair to have that skepticism, especially based off of the history of Vivek and this ownership group and how they've handled coaches. Mike Malone on line 1. So, if you have that skepticism, that's fine. I'm not saying you should fully dismiss it, but Monty's the guy in charge. He's the GM. He has that title. I'll give him full responsibility for it. I'm certainly not letting him off the hook, even if I have my suspicions that it wasn't only him. If there was truly a line in the sand and the Kings felt that they had to choose between Mike or this front office, they made the wrong freaking decision. The wrong decision. Especially if the primary reason for them making that decision was because it's easier to get rid of a coach in season than it's easier to get rid of a general manager and front office in season. That may be true, but if that is a significant motivating factor, it's even worse. It's even worse. And finally, if the front office acknowledges that the roster wasn't good enough, that the roster was flawed, but they fired Mike Brown anyway, what else is that than making Mike their fall guy? It's the literal definition. You couldn't have tried to improve the roster before getting rid of the only successful coach you've had in the last 2 decades? You didn't think you could do that? I know the Pistons' loss was bad, but that's a knee-jerk freaking reaction. And you talk about accountability. Accountability, this buzzword going around the organization. You talk about accountability when you didn't take accountability for your admitted issues with this roster. You instead put it all on the shoulders of the guy that you could easily fire. Only the Kings, man. Only the Kings. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong. I'm talking $250 in bonus bets. How does that sound? The only way, or the way you get it, all you have to do is win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a win, whether you're betting on players and who will score a touchdown or how many points each team will ultimately score. It's thrilling, it's fun, and if you're like me, a Raiders fan who really has no reason to watch the Raiders from this point, they can't even lose correctly at this point in time, and they certainly won't be playing in the postseason. Hey, this is a good way to make these games with these teams I don't really care about, or I'm not rooting for, a little more interesting. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So there was some good that happened today before the Sacramento Kings took on the Los Angeles Lakers in Crypto.com Arena. I went to the Golden One Center where the Stockton Kings played a game today. And why was I there? Because Devin Carter, Kings 13th overall pick, Kings rookie Devin Carter, who has been out the last 6 months after having shoulder surgery on his left shoulder. Devin Carter made his pro debut. It's not his NBA debut, it's his G League debut. He played with the Stockton Kings and he balled out. 29 points, 11 of 18 from the field, 6 of 9 from three-point range. 14 of his 29 points came in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter. Dude looked fantastic. And look, this is what you want to see. Oh, in addition to that, sorry, I'm shortchanging him. He also had 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, played 33 minutes in his first game, and the Stockton Kings won. This is what you want to see out of an NBA player playing in the G League. G League numbers are not to be super overanalyzed. And I don't mean this as a shot, but like Colby Jones, I'm pretty sure, is averaging like 24 points per game in the G League. So that means he's an NBA player. What that doesn't mean is that he's guaranteed to be a 24 point per game or 20, in the case of Devin Carter, a 29 point per game player at the NBA level. I don't think any of us are expecting that. But what you wanted to see is a guy that, one, looked okay, and two, looked like he was an NBA caliber player and looked like he was a step above the G League talent around him. Devin Carter passed that test with flying colors. Now, I will tell you, from being in the arena watching, he also looked gassed. He looked tired a lot, and he even admitted as much afterwards in his kind of post-game press conference that he was tired. We expect this, right? Even if he was cleared to run and jog and stay in shape. A shoulder injury, you can still run and try and stay in shape and work on your cardio as much as possible. It's not the same thing as game shape. It's a cliche heard around the league because it's true. He looked gassed. He's getting into shape. It's fine. It's nothing to be concerned about. There's also a number of times where he was moving that shoulder, probably working through the wear and tear. He was talking about, this is not the first time he's had this injury, by the way. He had the exact same injury and the exact same procedure done on his other shoulder, his right shoulder, during high school. And one of the things he was telling us about is because there's scar tissue there, like you'll hear pops and you'll hear things that are a little scary and a little unnerving. But since he's gone through it before, it's actually a little bit easier for him because, again, he's experienced this before. And what he told us is nothing feels or seems or is different this time compared to last time. And in between those two times, he played great for Providence in college, right? And he became an NBA caliber player and was drafted to the Sacramento Kings. So that's encouraging. That's good news. He says, I asked him like how close he feels he is to 100%. He said he feels very, very close. However, I will say my personal opinion, watching him play in person, I think he was playing at like 75% today. He had bursts where he was probably 85, 90, 95%, where it looked like he was like trying to give his all. And the reason why I say he was playing at 75% is so much of what we've seen from Devin Carter in college, so much of what we've expected him to be for the Sacramento Kings, or we do expect him to be for the Sacramento Kings, is this high energy, Tasmanian devil, attacking ball handlers on defense, flying in for rebounds, right? Just this guy that is a hustle and energy guy who is scrappy and will just do all those little things, right? Get down and dirty and get that job done. That's not the version of Devin Carter that I saw. I saw a extremely well-polished offensive version of Carter today. Saw him knock down 6 3-pointers, which was a welcome sight because we haven't seen a team with a Kings jersey knocking down threes in the Golden One Setter very much this season. That we didn't see, though, the high energy, high octane, I'm everywhere, I'm scrappy version of Devin Carter. He did have 3 steals, and they were good steals, smart steals. A couple of, like, one was he just picked off a pass, ran down the other way, dunked it. Another one was he was running back in transition, just stole the ball from the ball carrier in transition. So they were good to see. I'm not saying he wasn't trying, but I think it's going to be clear when we see 100% Devin Carter in full good-to-go mode versus what we saw in just his first game back, his first game that he's played since, I think, March of this year. So A+. A+ debut for Devin. A+. I saw what I wanted to see. I know it can get better. I know there can be higher energy, and that makes me very, very excited. But a 29-point, 8 rebound, 3 assists, 3 steal debut, how can you possibly ask for more than that? Now, I'm realistic. I don't think Devin Carter is saving this organization and saving this season and turning this season around, but he played well. He played hard, and if he keeps this up, he's going to make it tough on Doug Christie to find a spot on the rotation and find some minutes to play him. I hope to hell they're not Keon Ellis's minutes. Maybe they're Kevin Huerter's. I don't know. But he played really, really good. It was exciting to see, and I was glad to see that in person. It was fun to watch inside the Golden One Center. If you want to see clips, you can go to my Twitter account, @MattGeorgeSack. And you can see I posted a bunch of clips of just different shots and different plays that he made in this game from what I shot from my spot in the media section in the Golden One Center. So go and check that out. Also, while you're there, hey, share with me your thoughts on this Kings game tonight, your thoughts on where the Kings are at. Do you have any lingering thoughts on Mike Brown? You want to tell me to shut up and move on? Hey, it's all fair game. You can hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack or on Blue Sky at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or feel free to leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Again, I promise you this is not just going to be a Mike Brown sob story podcast for the remainder of the season. Ultimately, we all want the same thing. We all want the Kings to succeed. I take no joy in the Kings losing games. Just say, I told you so, I was right. I don't want to be that person. I have no interest in being that person. I want the Sacramento Kings to win and be successful. I'm just being honest with you. I'm just being real with you. I'm not trying to make you depressed. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Kings are in a bad way because this is a continuation of a pattern that has plagued this organization throughout this ownership's history, but really through the last two decades pretty much, with the exception of one great year. The year that Mike Brown won the unanimous Coach of the Year and turned this organization around, but still got fired. Well, Kings return home, where they've been so good. Let's see if they can end their 6-game losing streak against the Dallas Mavericks, who will be shorthanded. They are dealing with a fight that they got in with Yusuf Nurkic. So a couple players are not going to be available in that game, including, I think, P.J. Washington's not going to play. Luka Doncic is out with injury, I believe. So maybe that'll be better, although the Kings just got their ass kicked by the Lakers tonight, who were without LeBron James, so I don't know. We'll see what's different. We'll see what Doug Christie and this team can figure out and what changes, if any, are made between now and then, but I'm not holding my breath. Appreciate your support, as always. The support of the last couple days has been amazing. I wish the circumstances were better. We got over 10,000 subscribers finally on the Locked On Kings YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Audio listeners, you've been blowing me away with your response and your numbers and things like that. If you could, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review of this podcast. I deeply would appreciate it. You can just hit 5 stars and leave it at that. Or it would really help me out if you hit 5 stars and then leave a little blurb about why you like the podcast or why you'd encourage others to listen to the podcast. It does wonders for this show. Believe me, it does wonders. A lot of you are new listeners as well. Welcome in. I promise you this podcast is not normally this depressing. Normally we like to have fun and be optimistic here covering the Sacramento Kings, but the reality is what it is right now, and it's not a fun one. I've forgotten what the beam looks like. I need to see that light in the sky again. Hopefully we'll see it soon. Appreciate your support. My name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.